Radio is broadcast on LSL Podcast Channel. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the channel.
The American story is the story of what is possible when people take ownership of their future. The United States of America has been among the greatest forces for good in the history of the world and the greatest defenders of sovereignty, security, and prosperity for all.
The tone of it was really bad, I think, and in so many ways, I think we all want to make sure that America's strong, but I think his speech weakened America, and I think was something that is going to make it very hard for us to carry on a lot of diplomatic work that we have to.
She's a dangerous person who doesn't tell the truth.
Drew's last day is tomorrow, and I just want to remind him of how hard it is to host a radio show on his way out the door. How you doing?
I thought she did that to me on purpose, Chance.
Yeah, it's just one...
just testing me every time she can.
One last gift to Drew before he shuffles off to his next professional adventure.
Yeah, get that demo tape ready, Drew.
I have to say that I was in the middle of a Good Samaritan thing. That's why, honestly, I had to finish a conversation with somebody. You know how when you get a call, and this is like a call that you never hope that you receive, like bad news about something. I'm helping someone through something that is just heartbreaking. So anyway, so sorry about that, but we're here.
It's all right.
David Perdue is going to join us about this healthcare repeal that's not really a repeal. It's not a repeal. Let's be honest about what this is not. People think, well, it's our last chance to repeal Obamacare. Well, it's not really a repeal. They're going to send a lot of money back to the states, $1.1 trillion back to the states. Of course, the Democrats are trying to shred it. I think what I got the sense last night talking to folks about this, I get the sense that most people have become so used to being disappointed by Republicans on Capitol Hill that they're just not even following this. It's like you're just, your hopes have been raised so many times and then just destroyed. You get, oh, they're going to do it. Oh, it's great. Now we get the House, the Senate. We're going to do all this stuff. And then nothing happens. So nothing happens. And they're just disappointed all over again. So I get the sense, just some folks who came up to me yesterday, I get the sense that they just want to tell me when it's over. So I don't want to start getting my hopes up. Just tell me when it's over. So we'll see that all that leads us. So we'll talk about that with Perdue, and I mean, you got a couple of holdouts in the Senate. Rand Paul, it doesn't look like he's going to go along with this, and John McCain. I can't keep track of what John McCain's thinking. He wouldn't even agree to that skinny repeal, but now he's going to go to this. He looks like he's going to support this. I can't figure him out at all. And Lisa Murkowski says no, she's not going to support it. And the concern is the pre-existing conditions. Well, again, the entire notion of all pre-existing conditions being covered by insurance was always fanciful. It was always ridiculous. You can't cover all pre-existing conditions and balance the books on anything. You can't do it. You have to figure out another way to lower the cost of treatment. Not every time that we, go to the doctor should it be covered. I mean, the idea that every doctor's visit should be covered by insurance was always ridiculous. We talked about that with Osqui. We should get him on, get his sense on this. I'd like to know where he is. Roger Stone's going to join us. You never know what you're going to get with Roger Stone. I want him to come into the studio, though, because I want to study his style of dress and see what I can learn for my new Fox show. Well, Roger's a character. Well, now it looks like Trump was at least incidentally wiretapped. Remember they all made fun of him for saying they wiretap me, and how dare you say anything? Clapper says we didn't wiretap. Turns out there was wiretapping of Manafort. But during the election, after the election. I love how they wiretapped Manafort during the campaign. And this was part of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So they were tracking someone overseas, and then they pick up the incidental information about Manafort. So Manafort gets swept up in this. So they were listening to him for some period of time, and then they came up empty. So then they just pulled back on the covering Manafort because they got nothing. And then Comey comes back along. Let's start this up again. And then Comey starts it back up again. It's like, it reminds me of when they kept pushing poor Ireland to adopt the EU Constitution. Ireland's like, this Constitution's a disaster. We don't want to be part of it. I don't know how many referenda they voted on in Ireland. They just keep going back until they get something. Okay, we'll vote on it for a third time. And ultimately, they just give in. So you got the sense that this is what they were doing with Manafort. They'll find something. Just get another wiretap going on him. Let's do anything that we can get on him. But the deep state is there. The deep state is so burrowed in. All right, so we'll get to all that. The speech by President Trump yesterday, I was reading the New York Times account to torture myself. Sorry, it was in my bag. I was reading the New York Times account, and it's a wonder this newspaper is still in business at all. It is so removed from the way, I'm going to say normal people think about things. Here's the title of the New York Times above the fold. Heralding America First, incombative UN speech. Trump airs list of threats. Trump airs list of threats. That's the subtitle. And then they go on and on and on about the word sovereignty and how it's usually small nations that are threatened by some type of military incursion or takeover from another country, domination from another country. That small nations are usually the ones that use words like sovereign and sovereignty. Trump offered the General Assembly a strikingly selective definition of sovereignty, threatening to act aggressively against countries like North Korea, Iran, and Venezuela, whose policies he opposes, yet says almost nothing about Russia. Again, Russia obsession, which seized territory from its neighbor, Ukraine, and meddled in the American presidential election. So they got Russia into the second paragraph. But more important than how he defined sovereignty was Mr. Trump's adoption of the word itself. Well, see, they hate sovereignty. The New York Times hates the idea of an independent United States of America. Why? They don't like things like Second Amendment. That's one of the things that we have. They don't like the Second Amendment. They don't like this idea of an America held up as a beacon. We are special. We believe we're special. We believe America is built on this idea of individual liberty and freedom. Freedom from big government intrusion, big brother. We don't like that. We don't want to be part of the big global order that tells us whether, we can keep our thermostats at 72 or carry a 9mm if we want to. If our localities say that we're all licensed and all that, we believe we should be able to do that. But the New York Times doesn't like any of that. They have a few freedoms that they like, freedom of the press. But other than that, a lot of the religious freedom, that has its limits. Freedom of the press, freedom of speech has its limits too for the New York Times. If you are someone who believes in a traditional order, your freedom of speech is a threat to someone else. So just standing for America is threatening. That threatens them because I think more than ISIS or more than, I'd say China, Russia, any of that, more than that, they're not really afraid of Russia. They're just using Russia to bash Trump. But more than being afraid of Russia or China or ISIS or any other type of Islamic terrorism, criminality, they're afraid of traditional Americans. They're afraid of you. They feel like you're a threat. And so since you voted for Trump, by extension, he's a threat. Since he stands for America, America first, that whole presentation is very threatening to the global order as worshipped by the New York Times. But I went back and watched parts of the speech yesterday, and I thought it was probably his best speech and one of the best speeches delivered before the United Nations by an American president, probably in my lifetime. I mean, going back to Reagan, has got to be one of the best speeches ever. Hello. I mean, he talked about sovereignty. He talked about the need for America to not remake the world in its own image, but in standing up for her own people and understanding basic truths about what communism has done, be an incredibly powerful force for good for everyone, and say, look, we'll be happy to work at the United Nations, but you all have to reform yourself.
We do not expect diverse countries to share the same cultures, traditions, or even systems of government. But we do expect all nations to uphold these two core sovereign duties: to respect the interests of their own people and the rights of every other sovereign nation.
I will always put America first, just like you, as the leaders of your countries, will always and should always put your countries first. That makes sense. That's conservative populism. People say, well, the word nationalism is dangerous. Well, depends on how you proceed in a nationalist spirit. If you proceed in a nationalistic spirit to crush others, crush other countries, invade other countries, subjugate your own people, yeah, that's not good. But if you believe in pluralism and religious liberty, and you can come from any part of the world, but if you come here legally as an American citizen, we will embrace you, and we will welcome a lot of the traditions you bring into the country, as long as they're not hostile to our basic freedoms. But that's a critical part of the speech, just like you believe in the preeminence of your people. We do that for our people. There's nothing wrong with that. Only in the New York Times, only in the world of Rob Reiner and the Russia investigation, we're going to get into that, Rob Reiner and others getting together, yeah, Meathead and others, other foreign policy elites have gotten together to start their own Russia investigation. Oh my! Think of the fat cats they got to throw money at that. They must have all these Tom Steyer types, all these Soros types, just shoveling money at yet another left-wing operation that will do zero to help the lives of the average person. So, but that's what they're doing. We'll get into that in a little bit. But isn't that amazing that a preeminent America, an America that is defended by her president and whose people are put first, is a threat? Is a threat. That's a threat to the New York Times.
This idea of sovereignty, that's a loaded term. This is a favorite expression of authoritarian leaders from China to Russia to African dictatorships. It's about, we all have different values. Don't preach to me about human rights. You've often heard that kind of rhetoric pushing back at America, saying, democracy, open society is the way forward. So to hear an American president, that's a real departure from the public comments and really a tenet of U.S. foreign policy, Democrat and Republican, for decades.
He was saying the world should be damn. No. That's Jim Scudo of CNN, national security correspondent for CNN. So for him, sovereignty is a long word. Probably some people probably can't spell it over there at CNN, but that's a four-letter word. Because that's tethered to dictatorships. I lived in the former Soviet Union. I never heard the word sovereignty used the entire time I was there. I never heard the word sovereignty used. In Russian, never heard it used. Now, they believed in, subjugation of individual rights. I didn't hear sovereignty. But we know what you heard in Russia, the motherland. It was the motherland. And Putin definitely believes, bring back that sense of patriotism about the motherland. But it wasn't sovereignty. Sovereignty is very different. The sovereign, obviously the sovereign goes back to, royalty, the sovereign, the king. But when we talk about sovereignty, we talk about borders, we talk about language, we talk about the American understanding, our culture. It's not a four-letter word, but it's a threat to the New York Times. It's a threat to CNN because they want the global order instituted. Globalism, global order, global trade deals, global understanding, global rights, which mean things like you can't offend people with your speech. Remember in Canada, they can kick you out. You offend people in Canada, they kick you out, don't let you come back in. 855-40-LAURA. The media going absolutely crazy over this speech. Our prayers to the Mexican people. A horrific earthquake. So many children have been lost. I have friends down there. I've been emailing them, getting horrible stories about what's happening in Mexico. It is just another heartbreak. Puerto Rico getting battered by Hurricane Maria. And they've been through so much. They already have a fiscal disaster on their hands in Puerto Rico. And of course, it's a U.S. territory. I don't know how they're going to survive this, but they will. We'll take a break. 855-40-LAURA. I heard a policeman talking about old school home security systems and why so many cops don't trust them. And he said they're so easy to disable that you constantly get false alarms. He said he's a fan of Blink Home Security and that police are going with Blink to protect their homes and families. Blinks are discreet, super affordable video cams that you install yourself in minutes. They're wire-free and run on 2 batteries that last 2 years. Blinks go inside and outside, and they're motion activated, so they're always on duty. And the instant Blink detects something, it sends a video alert to my smartphone. Basically, Blink stops crime before it happens. And Blink's live feed option lets me monitor my home from my smartphone. So no worrying if the kids are home safe and the doors are locked. Check out this deal I've got for you. Get 3 Blink cams for what the other guys charge for just 1. Go to blinkprotect.com/Laura. That's blinkprotect.com/Laura. And plus, you order now and you can get 10% off. That's blinkprotect.com. Doesn't it? I mean, you want an independent nation to be able to stand for her people and the wealth of the people and the rights of the people. But again, the word really means, in this case, independence. You want an independent nation. The president also discussed the idea of these absurd international trade deals, which we didn't play yesterday. We'll play it when we come back, and we'll remind you of why that ties into the idea of sovereignty as well. Nice to hear compliments about how great your hair looks when you're out and about, and you want to look your best. And fall is a time where air gets a little crisper, and you start moving into the holiday season. I can't even believe I'm saying that, holiday season. How can it possibly be? It seems like we're just celebrating Christmas. But you know what? You want to look your best. And one way to help your hair, and whether you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter, keep it healthy, is my favorite Ovation Cell Therapy treatment. Now, it's my 3rd bottle in the shower. You've heard me talk about it before. I use it about twice a week after I shampoo. Not every day, but use it about twice a week. And it's awesome. Helps repair the split ends, makes your hair look thicker and healthier, shinier, and it's manageable. You're just going to love this. So try it. Go to ovationhair.com. If you haven't tried it yet, guess what? You have a great opportunity. 15% off for a limited time. Everything on the site is 15% off. Ovationhair.com. Great products. Great company. Just love them. And there's still time to get the 15% off, but you got to go to ovationhair.com and select Laura Ingraham in the survey at checkout. Ovationhair.com. That was great. Yesterday's speech. I sound like a hopeless groupie. I understand that. But these are the issues I've been talking about with all of you for the last 16 years on the radio. You're going to hear a lot more from individuals who have been personally harmed by the ill effects of globalization when I do the Fox show. So we're going to hear from people who, their bottom lines, their employees, their livelihoods, their towns, their communities, their neighborhoods have been forever changed. And I'm not talking in a good way, because of these stupid trade deals that are not enforced, unenforceable, or give other countries, not just China, but other countries as well, an upper hand over the United States. We have a lot to get to here on the Laura Ingraham Show. 855-40-LAURA. I love reading the media commentary about the speech. The more I read it, the happier I get. It's just like Election Day. The more upset Rachel Maddow and the crowd was at MSNBC, the happier I was. This is why we went to bed on election night at 5:30. Drew, what was it, 5:30?
Yes. That was about the last time we had our drink. Yes,
yeah.
About 5:30-ish or so. Yeah.
We were doing tequila shots at 5 a.m.
We were happy.
Oh, my God. The bartender thought something was wrong. That bar is closed, by the way. That bar's not open anymore.
Everybody was ridiculing us for like a year and a half.
No, we were getting slammed. So on election night, it was 5 in the morning. Yeah. It was like, there's like a group of us, we had 5 or 6 people.
Right.
And there were like some fraternity brothers on the street, like whooping it up in New York. We're all for Trump. And we roll into this bar. Nothing's open. We roll into this bar. bar, 5 o'clock. This British kid who's tending bar looks at us like, what is going on? I think I closed my eyes at 5:30. I woke up at 6:15. I was like, okay, let's do the show. I was so excited.
Well, yeah, because you had a Fox and Friends hit in
I had
like
a Fox
3
and
hours.
Friends hit. Yeah, no, it was.
You didn't sleep.
No sleep. But I mean, I'm as happy today as I was then because this was such a great speech, and all the same people are upset because they want America to be merely part of a global order, not an independent, free, sovereign nation. And in fact, a lot of the EU champions, when the EU was really getting going, they thought the 20th century was the century of the evil push for sovereignty. We're now moving into the 21st century, which is a new world order, a new world understanding. So the EU is going to deliver that nirvana to the globe because we're going to see how these large bodies of countries working together are going to be much more powerful than the individual nation state. Then we had Brexit. Then we had the rise of Marine Le Pen. She ultimately wasn't successful, but Macron is finding out that democracy and sovereignty go hand in hand. He's finding that out in France right now. Joining us now, I'm delighted he's with us. A man who is described, by the way, as the outsider who has become Trump's man inside the Senate. I like that. You know who he looks like, by the way, in this picture? He looks like Brian Mulroney from the side, the old Prime Minister of Canada. Has anyone ever told you that, Senator Perdue? Senator David Perdue from Georgia, my friends. Hi, Senator Perdue. How are you?
Well, hey, Laura, how are you? That's a compliment. But before we get started, I want to give you a congratulations shout-out here. I'm very excited about your new Fox show. I just think I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh, well, you know what? You know what? I'm going to say thank you, number one. Number two, a lot of you senators are already telling me, I'm not going to stay up late. You're going to have to pre-tape me. And I'm going to say, okay, then you're not coming on the show. Okay, so
hey,
you
call me 24/7, Laura.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, if you're Trump's man inside the Senate, then you got to roll with me at 10 o'clock at night. You can't. That doesn't sound
you
good.
You got it.
But you have to show up, okay? Because I've already heard from some of your colleagues that, well, can you tape me at 7 p.m.? Like, what part of no don't you understand? No. And we're gonna have a fun show, so you're gonna want to come on this show. This is gonna be not that all the other shows on Fox aren't fun, but we're gonna have a bit of a different approach to some of these issues. And do you cook, by the way? Because we're gonna have a cooking segment every night too. Do you cook?
No, I'll be with you, but I'll eat it. But I can't cook it.
I'm just kidding about the cooking. At least not right away. They won't. Apparently, we won't get a stove right away. But I'm working on that. Yeah. Senator Perdue, let's talk about where we are here. First, your comment on the president's speech before we get into the Obamacare repeal effort, and then we're going to, of course, talk about the border wall and the RAISE Act. But what's your reaction to the caterwauling we're hearing from the media and political elites about Trump's use of the word sovereignty, which apparently they're just terrified of?
Anytime I hear Democrats caterwauling, I know our president has struck a nerve. And I'm so excited today, Laura. I share your enthusiasm. Look, this president is re-engaging with the rest of the world doing two things. One, he's telling our allies we're going to be there for them. But more importantly, he's telling the other people who would do nefarious things what's important to America. And in these trade conversations, look, world poverty is down by 2/3 since 1965, and the Great Society's war on poverty started. But in America, our poverty rate hasn't moved an inch. And one big reason for that is that our trade deals have been so one-sided. And this president gets it.
Well, and I think that, again, we're finding out a lot more about how Donald Trump's stance on trade with his terrific U.S. Trade Representative Bob Lighthizer and Wilbur Ross, just their new approach to NAFTA and how they're working on the rewrite of NAFTA. They're now aggressively pursuing intellectual property theft from not just China but other countries in the Korea Free Trade Deal. Boy, you have a diminution of the cheating going on. They haven't even really gotten going on a lot of this stuff, but already the cheating has receded somewhat.
Well, I've lived in Asia. I've lived in Europe. I've dealt with these archaic trade rules all my career. So many of these rules, as you said earlier, are unenforceable. They're vague. There are loopholes, and so people have taken advantage. And the beneficiaries have been third world. The third world economies are growing. We've opened our markets, but it's time now, and this president knows it, it's time now to protect, to some degree, getting our economy going again. This job one right now and getting level playing field with the rest of the world is one of the best ways to do it. we know that the rest of the world's growing consumption is there. We are the best. We're the 800-pound gorilla economy right now to do that, to meet it. And so I'm very excited about this speech in the UN yesterday for several reasons. But this thing about trade is really, really going to get us going in the right direction.
So this new Graham Cassidy Obamacare so-called repeal. I mean, I have my doubts about this for a variety of reasons. Number one, I mean, God bless him, but Lindsey Graham's involved. If Lindsey Graham is involved in a major piece of legislation, it's never good. I'm sorry. I'm just being. I mean, I love him as a person. I just want to say that I adore him as a person. He's a wonderful human being. However, I think usually Lindsey takes us down a garden path in a variety of ways. And I'm very concerned about what I'm hearing from fiscal conservatives about this, and also those who truly advocate a repeal of Obamacare, which they say this is not. This is a major block grant to the states, but that it's not a true repeal of Obamacare, which is what you guys voted on so many times.
Well, I think I share some of your concerns. Ron Johnson, Dean Heller, Bill Cassidy are also very involved in this. In my opinion, there's no, at this point, given the terrible nature of the structure of Obamacare, and given that we failed several weeks ago in terms of repealing Obamacare, it's very difficult to get a perfect solution. I'm afraid that this deal is the only thing standing between us and a single payer, and that's a real concern. So there's a question about trying to get what we want, and that's a full repeal and replace, which Republicans have been saying for 7 years they would do. And honestly, in the Senate failed doing that. And three chairmen, and I want everybody to know this, three chairmen of the Republican caucus voted against what leadership said we needed to do, and that's repeal and replace Obamacare. So here we are in the 11th hour. We got to get this done. Even if we get this done, it's got to be done by the end of next week, Laura. So this is an attempt to solve four things. Access, there are 300,000 people in my state that don't, under Obamacare, who don't have access to health care, and they make less than the poverty rate. In 2014, Laura, 8 million people were fined $2 billion by the IRS because they didn't sign up for Obamacare, and half of those people make less than $25,000. We were supposed to find a way to make Medicaid sustainable. Today, under Obamacare, it's an uncapped entitlement that we cannot afford. There's no way we're going to be able to afford that going down the road. Here's one of the criticisms that is being leveled, and one of the many criticisms being leveled at the Graham Cassidy. 14 of 15 of the states that would stand to gain from these block grants of money are run by Republicans, so they're red states. And Democratic, powerhouses like California, New York, Massachusetts would lose billions of dollars. And apparently Graham and Cassidy have both talked that up to conservatives, according to the Washington Post today. So they're selling that to conservatives as like, we're going to stick it to California, we're going to stick it to New York. But it's just, to me, that's a big, that kind of seems like a big vulnerability to me. It's like, okay, we're getting all these red states are going to benefit. And how long is that? How long is that block grant? How long is that going to really help the states if they're capped at the amount of money they can get, regardless of the cost of health, health services. So the cap will also be exceeded, it seems, pretty quickly. Well, what these guys are doing is they're talking about the allocation is based on the number of people in the state and the needs and the income. So they have a different formula than Obamacare. Under Obamacare, 4 states, California, New York, Maryland, and Massachusetts, get the lion's share. California got $23.5 billion last year just in the expansion fees. That's outrageous. It's uncapped. I mean, basically, they can pick a number. What these guys are trying to do, what Cassidy's trying to do, is have a more rigorous calculation about how the states get allocated and push that money back to the states. Let the governors under the 1332 waivers have more flexibility in terms of deciding what the needs of their people are in that state. This is a federalist move here in many regards. I understand there's going to be criticism with any one of these solutions, given that we started with Obamacare. Any one of these solutions, given that you can't repeal 100% of it under the rules of the Senate today, because you're never going to get a Democrat to vote for that, this looks like about as good a deal as we're going to get, short of having a debate with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren on a single-payer health care system.
Let's move to the wall and the RAISE Act. Obviously, you and Tom Cotton, phenomenal. We love the RAISE Act. Common sense capping of the number of legal immigrants who come into the country, low income, a lot of low income, low skilled immigrants, because we've taken about 1 million a year. And now Paul Ryan has said, it's reportedly, that there will be no wall. McConnell has made it clear he's not behind closed doors. We have all the reports that he doesn't want a wall. And yet this is Donald Trump's, one of his top campaign promises. What has to happen for any type of amnesty to be agreed to 800,000 people whose average age now is 23, many of them descending upon Nancy Pelosi in a not so polite manner the other day? What has to be part of any amnesty in your view?
Well, you've got to stop the chain migration. I mean, my goodness, the wall has got to be there. We're going to find a way. I'm in the Senate right now fighting every day to find the funding to do that. This is a precept that got this president elected. We're not going to stop fighting for that. It's a national security issue. We all know that. You and I have talked about that several times. But what we've got to do on any DACA fix has got to include a RAISE solution. And what RAISE does is move us to a proven immigration system based on merit. It's a merit-based system, just like Canada's and Australia. They've had this for decades. And let me tell you something. They are attracting the best and brightest of the world, young workers, STEM workers, and we're falling behind in that regard. Today's system is just broken. As you know, you've talked about this repeatedly on your program. 1 in 15 people who come in under our legal system today come in with skills for work. And that leads to about half of all the legal immigrant families, all the households, are in the welfare system. That's not the American dream.
No.
And what we want to do is go to a program that's pro-worker, pro-growth, and has been proven. This is not an experiment. Canada and Australia have been doing this for decades, Laura.
Well, we're just so happy that you're in the Senate. I mean, you're doing such great work on so many different issues, and there's a lot of challenges that our country's facing. We send prayers to the people of Puerto Rico and Mexico, and still, of course, in Houston and in Florida. I mean, there's just so much that our country's dealing with, and we need senators who speak truth to power. And we're going to hold you accountable every step of the way, Senator. But I mean, so far so good. I mean, I just really like you. So you're great.
Well, that's a great formula. I tell people, you hold me accountable and tell us when we're getting off track, because we're doing as best we can to do what we told people we would do, just like this president is.
Well, we appreciate it. We'll take a break. I'll check back with you soon, and I've already gotten a commitment that he's coming on live on my show. He's not going to be pre-taped like some of these grandpa senators who have to go to bed early. We'll take a break.
Hey, Laura.
Does Jimmy Kimmel's outrage over the Cassidy Graham healthcare repeal push in any way convince you that it's not the right way to go? He went crazy on this yesterday. Another celebrity, another political issue.
As long as I hold this office, I will defend America's interests above all.
Well, that's kind of an odd juxtaposition of music and soundbite there, but let me try to explain it. Irving Berlin, of course, his 1,500 songs, 2 big anthems, dozens of standards. You just heard one of them, Cheek to Cheek, is an American icon, not born in the United States. And a big anniversary coming up on Friday. Lee Habib, who, of course, is one of our favorites. He's a great writer and has his own incredible America Stories show and network, which brings these stories to the fore. Berlin, Bear Bryant, his piece that he wrote last week for Life Zet, and we need to talk about the goodness in this country and the cultural reservoir that we need to, I think, dip our children into and our grandchildren, so they understand why American culture is worth preserving, beyond just whatever Taylor Swift is singing today. And he joins us now, Lee Habib, from Our America Stories, with us now on the Laura Ingraham Show. Lee, to hear that description of where Berlin came from and what he saw as a child, obviously great heartache, but great triumph in his art by the time he came to the United States and began creating.
Well, it's true, Laura. And the only memory he had
of being a Jew in Russia, and these were pogroms against Jews. This was religious persecution. He said to his biographer, quote, "The only memory I had was lying on a blanket by the side of the road, watching my dad's house burn to the ground. By daylight, the house was in ashes." And of course, America welcomes him. He comes here legally, by the way, and ultimately lands in New York City, in Alphabet City. And his father dies, Laura, when he's 8 years old. So it's not only that he suffered that tragedy, but his life had like more sad stories than the Old Testament. And yet he went to work immediately, Laura. He went to work waiting tables and soon discovered that when he was singing the latest hits, his tips went up. And by the time he was 14, he was providing for his family. By the time he was 20, he'd written Alexander's Ragtime Band with some friends, Bessie Smith, Louis Armstrong, and then Bing Crosby wrote it. And only in America could a story of like this happen, Laura. And I think that we don't spend enough time talking about who we are and who we were. And I think too often as we're doing the politics of the day, if we don't remind Americans of the past, well, the left's going to rewrite history. And so often I believe what happens in the future is determined by our knowledge of the past, and our own past.
The most played and most popular song of all time beyond Happy Birthday was Irving Berlin's. Lee, I remember every time Christmas rolled around in Connecticut, my grandmother, who was born in the year 1900, she would sit in her unassuming, very modest little breakfast table in her apartment, and we would go over and see her, and she lived with her daughter, lived with her, who didn't marry, and we would go over and sit, and my parents would have a glass of wine, and she would sit and she would cry when she heard this song because, you know, it reminded her of her childhood, her time in her 40s during World War II, where this song really touched a chord. I hear this to this day, and it puts a lump in my throat, even when it's not Christmas. Do you think of people who've gone on to their final rest? You think of your family around Christmas, even if you didn't grow up in a snowy area, snowy terrain. There's something about his writing that just, like I have a lump in my throat right now just hearing this.
Well, you know, his writing was very simple and direct, and he actually had written about this, and he had basically said, I don't want to write to the elites because they don't interest me. And in essence, he was writing to what Hillary Clinton called the deplorables. He was writing to the average, ordinary American who worked hard, and as he called it, was the soul of the country. And so he wasn't interested in opera or classical music or fancy stuff. He was interested in simple, direct songs. That one, by the way, sold 100 million copies, Laura. It's still the greatest selling single of all time. And here's the irony. He's Jewish, and he writes White Christmas. He wasn't talking about the oppression of hearing White Christmas in this Christian nation. He adopted this nation, loved Christians, and gave Christians a present. Could you imagine somebody doing that today?
No, I frankly can't. And it's not just, of course, Berlin and so many other great young Sammy Kahn and all the great songwriters, composers. Most of them were Jewish. Some from German Jews.
So many of the studio bosses too.
Right.
Yep.
And it was not. It was a sign of patriotism. It was patriotism not because it was a national Christian religion, but because they understood the foundation of the country was primarily a Christian foundation, and they thought, why not honor that? And I can still be a faithful Jew. I can still have my own traditions, but this is something I can give back to the nation, and boy, did he give it back.
Yeah, it was a gift as he saw it, and the same with God Bless America as well. I mean, again, here's a Russian who writes the ultimate homage to the country that adopted him. And the point here, Laura, I think, is that, the immigrants then didn't come here to change America. They came to have America change them. And it did. Look at Irving's life. And God Bless America was essentially written, Laura, as a prayer. And people don't know this. He wrote it in 1918, couldn't sell it, and then dusted it off in 1938 because he sensed that Nazism was not only rising, but that soon America would be entangled in a war. I think he pretty much understood this, and a lot of Jews did. And by the way, the opening lyrics to that, which are rarely sung, Your favorite, Ronan Tynan, that Irish tenor, he always sings it. But here are the opening words, Laura, and maybe we can hear Ronan sing them.
Yeah.
But the opening lyrics that people don't know are these. While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer. Then the song begins. Now today, those would be about multiple microaggressions on campuses across America. Prayer, swearing allegiance to your country, sort of saccharine false patriotism, as modern singers would see it.
We have Ronan Tynan. Let's listen, and then you can. And again, a guy who's Irving Berlin, who's one of 8 children, the youngest of 8 children, attended school for 2 years, had no formal musical education, none.
Yep. And by the way, he took pride in that fact. He only played the black keys, couldn't read music. And when asked about not having that musical education, he said, look, it gave me an advantage because I didn't know the rules, so I didn't know I was breaking them. He also didn't need to appeal to instructors or to the higher-ups that might give him blessings about what was good or what was not. And what's most fascinating about that song, Laura, is you sense no anger in this man, and he had a lot to be angry about. He lived through the Great Depression. He could have been raging against the machine. Meanwhile, one of our favorite writers, Bruce Springsteen, refuses to sing God Bless America, hates the song so much that instead he sings Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land, which, of course, is an ode to the elimination of private property. So imagine this. Bruce Springsteen grows up in Freehold, New Jersey, with a father who works and a mother who goes to church, and he's angry about what I don't know. Meanwhile, Irving Berlin is celebrating the country that adopted him, and it tells you a lot about Bruce, and more importantly, it tells us a lot about Irving Berlin.
A quintessentially American story. It's uniquely American. And from the iconic songs "White Christmas" and "God Bless America," think of you wrote both of those songs. I mean, that's just unbelievable. That in and of itself. But he lived to the age of 102. Lee died in 101. He died in 1989. And he actually, I think he was. We have a clip of him with Dinah Shore and Tony Martin. I believe, at least it's on my screen. I don't know if James can find it, play it. I can't play it. Hey, Lee, remember these days when you try to? Remember these days, Lee, when you try to play sound bites and just not playing
I remember them. I remember them.
Remember those, too, Lee? It didn't seem like it was this much of a lag. But what can you do? Yeah, it was like ever hit, and he's playing the piano, and of course he was in his 90s, early 90s, late 80s, and just happy. There's a happiness that just exuded from him, Lee, and you hear it in the keystrokes, you hear it in the lyrics, you hear it in the beat, and it makes you happy. I mean, it's a happiness, and we're kind of missing that in a lot of music today. It's a depravity. It's all sexuality with no subtlety. And that pure joy of music in America. I think that nostalgia is very alluring at different points in our history, but I think a lot of people miss that. I really do. I think a lot of people miss that feeling.
You know, Laura, I'll tell you this. There's an old man named Clint Eastwood. He's in his 80s. His last 2 movies have been #1 movies. Sully was #1. American Sniper was #1. Gran Torino was a monster hit. What do they all have in common? They're classic American stories. They're not entertainment. They're tough stories, but they're about reluctant heroes doing beautiful things. They're about love of country, love of family. The people in this country are starving for that. They're sick of the anger. They're sick of particularly the fake anger, Laura, that you not only see in Antifa and you not only see in rap, but it's a lot of rock and roll music. It's just raw anger and alienation. And the fact of the matter is we have so much to be happy and grateful for. But meanwhile, very few people have the actual courage to write simple stories. Eastwood's career alone is proof that you keep it simple, keep the sex scenes out, keep the stupidity out, aim a little higher, and write about beautiful things. By the way, 2 of his movies have priests in terribly and beautifully redeeming roles. When's the last time we've seen a priest be a good guy in movies?
No, probably a Yankee Doodle Dandy or something like that, 1938.
That's right.
I'm going back a ways there, Lee. And, of course, Lee Habib's Our America Stories, just fantastic. And it's important now that with all the left-right vitriol, the struggles of the day, the Antifa, the Black Lives Matter, pulling down the statues, Our American Stories is a gift. It's a gift that you're doing this, Lee, and we really, really appreciate it. And come back anytime. Your piece on Irving Berlin will be posted on Friday on LifeSet. So on the actual, is that the actual anniversary day, Lee?
That's the anniversary day. It definitely was 1989. And if your listeners would like, go to type in on Google the Ed Sullivan Show and Irving Berlin, and watch him sing God Bless America in the first verse, and then he's joined by the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America. By the way, they sing the second verse with him. All of the proceeds, by the way, to God Bless America went to the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America. Again, another gift from Berlin to his country.
Well, we'll pull that up and play that as we come back in next segment. Lee Habib, 101, Irving Berlin died September 22nd, 1989. Anniversary of his death is on Friday, but what a life. Lee Habib on the Laura Ingraham Show. I'm sure every one of my listeners understands the importance of oral care to your overall health. There's no denying the connection. And I'm also sure that many of you have a sensitive mouth or gums. And sometimes you have painful canker sores, or sadly, maybe even painful sores from something like chemotherapy, from cancer treatment. And what you may not know is that your mouthwash, especially if it's one of those brands that really burns, it may be making things worse. So you should try non-irritating, alcohol-free Closys Oral Rinse. That's Closys. Closys is like first aid for your mouth. It's as gentle as water, but it helps relieve common but uncomfortable, even painful issues in your mouth. And unlike other mouthwashes, Closys is also pH balanced, which eliminates the burn and the irritation. Try Closys Oral Rinse for sensitive mouth, gums, and canker sores for pain-free oral care. That's Closys, Closys. Learn more about the gentle, effective oral rinse at Closys.com or get Closys today at Walgreens, CVS Health, and Walmart. Of the best, biggest, and I think just filled with heart, charitable organizations that work with the poorest of the poor. There are a couple of organizations that I support, and they're just really close to my own heart. One of them is Little Sisters of the Poor, which takes care of the elderly indigent in the United States. And the other is Food for the Poor, which works in 17 different countries. Those affected by natural disaster, terrible government policies, and just horrible economic conditions. And Food for the Poor is just, they're phenomenal. They're really angels on earth. I say this, but I don't say this often, but they are. They're walking angels on earth. I love the fact that 95% of all the money Food for the Poor raises, 95% goes straight to help the poor. And so the charitable organizations on the ground, most of them that I dealt with in Guatemala were faith-based organizations. They're there, so they know who needs the most help and where to most effectively put your resources. That's what makes Food for the Poor, I think, so successful. This is what you can do, Laura Ingraham Show listeners. You can go to my website, lauraingraham.com, click on that banner, Food for the Poor banner, and you give $50. You give, listen to this, Water for Life for a suffering child. Water for Life and food for a year. I mean, you can afford $50. Most of you can. So to help me out, Food for the Poor, $50. And Water for Life, food for a year for one child. So all you need to do is go to lauraingraham.com. You can also call them, 844-868-4673. That's 844-868-4673. Food for the Poor.
She could have filed a false report in 2015 and still be telling the truth about you.
Look, anything's possible, all right? But it goes to credibility, doesn't it? All right? If you look at the in totality, this was a hit job. A political and financial hit job.
Is this a vast left-wing conspiracy?
No, vast, and don't be sarcastic.
Well, I mean, but you know, I was the one that Hillary Clinton said that to here 20 years ago.
We're going to be able to prove what we say. There are more things to come.
Newsmax has a piece that I retweeted. O'Reilly tweeted it. Hannity retweeted it. I retweeted it. Newsmax has a piece Bill O'Reilly's accuser arrested for false allegation of crime. I love how Lauer yesterday said, well, why is that relevant? The two things could be true. And O'Reilly might as well have been a lawyer because he made the point. Well, it goes right to credibility. If you're on the stand, you examine a witness, an adverse witness's credibility. That's what you do. So this piece is published. Go to my Twitter feed. You can read it about this person I've never heard of, who Perkita Burgess, I guess, made some claims against Bill O'Reilly, and now we find out she was in the habit of making claims that, at least on one occasion, were false. But Bill O'Reilly went on the Today Show, and it looked like Matt Lauer seemed a little intimidated. I like Matt Lauer, though. But O'Reilly's up on that, they're doing that stools, one looking at another, and O'Reilly's like 6'6". He can be intimidating and imposing. But he took every question. And they took most of the interview up by, about the departure from Fox News. And O'Reilly answered all the questions, said, we know where we're coming from on this. And finally, they got to the book, which, of course, is going to be another massive bestseller. Bill O'Reilly, Martin Dugard, Killing England, The Brutal Struggle for American Independence. What a great time to have this book coming out, given the fact that they're covering all the statues everywhere, tearing them down, pulling them down, throwing paint on them. New story about the Stonewall Jackson Mountain in, was it Georgia? They want to apparently take down 17,000 square foot of a sculpture, the biggest, quote, sculpture of its kind in the world. And Bill O'Reilly joins us now. Bill, we're really glad to have you on, and I enjoyed that Lauer exchange yesterday. How are you?
Well, thank you, and congratulations on your new Fox program. That'll be very good for you, Laura. I'm glad you got it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I learned a lot from you on television. What works, and when I didn't do such a great job, and you were a really good mentor to me, Bill. And I'll forever be grateful for you. You know that, and to you. And
thank you.
I really
think that's 95% of the women. I think that's 95% of the women in Fox News will tell you the same thing. Anyway, there's a lot in play, and I'm really happy to be on your radio program today. As you mentioned, the far left wants to wipe out American history and brand all of our icons as white supremacists. This is what the game is now. You didn't hear the term white supremacist a year ago. It's now new, and the goal is to throw out the entire Constitution of the United States because it was designed and forged by white supremacists like Washington, Jefferson, Madison, and Franklin. That's what's going on. Everybody should understand that. So I got lucky because Killing England, The Brutal Struggle for American Independence, focuses on Washington, Jefferson, and Franklin and tells you about them as men, gives you a totality of who they were, so that you, the individual American, can argue, can go to school board meetings, can go to your local government and say enough. In Dallas, Texas,
oh my
of
God,
all
I
places,
saw
they
this.
are trying to rename schools that bear George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and James Madison's moniker. That's insanity. This is madness. So the timing is right for Killing England, and I appreciate you mentioning it. I think that people will like it. It'll be fun to read, but you'll learn a lot.
Now, are schools getting your books? I mean, are you able to get high schools,
some of them,
junior highs?
Private schools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, private schools. We have a lot of, we have the Day the World Went Nuclear is our latest book for kids,
Mm-hmm.
while Killing the Rising Sun. The adult books are a little graphic. I mean, This Killing England, I mean, you're going to be shocked at some of the things that happened during that war, the Revolutionary War. It's a bit much for the younger kids, but certainly high school kids can read these books, and I'm hoping history teachers, order them. We know it is done in some private schools.
Well, I think that at a time where the basic foundations of our representative democracy are coming under attack by those who are supposed to be educating our children, it's really important that we have real historians. And Craig Shirley is a great writer on so many things. Just a book out, Citizen Nude. He did all the books on Reagan. Your books have been, I think, the biggest. Are your books the biggest historical accounts, best-selling ever? I mean, it seems like they must be
in the
globally.
world. They are. 17 million killing books in print.
Oh,
This is the seventh one of them.
Oh, my God.
And they're the biggest selling nonfiction book series in the world by far. So we're very blessed and lucky that we've been able to market and reach the folks, and they seem to like the books. So I'm very fortunate in that regard.
When we think about men such as George Washington, when he, of course, was the head of the Continental Army, and we think of Robert E. Lee, who was, of course, is now reviled, who just, 80 years ago, 50 years ago, was described as not only one of the greatest American soldiers ever, but one of the finest Christian gentlemen to ever lead men into battle. And for post-war recovery, quotes from Franklin Delano Roosevelt about Robert E. Lee. That there's no ability now to be broad-minded and to understand this is historical context. You have to look at the full lives of these individuals, not just during the Civil War, but what did they do after the war, and how did they treat their men during the war, and what were their real and ultimate beliefs about the human spirit and the human condition. That's lost on today's culture.
Yeah, but everything's lost because they don't even teach history in public schools anymore. People don't know. They're shocked. I was surprised when the research rolled in from Martin Dugard about how brave George Washington was. The courage of the man is stunning. It's stunning. Yet, he had slaves. He was a slave holder, okay? But what he personally did, just by himself, gave us the freedoms we have today. As for Robert E. Lee, he fought for the wrong side. He did. There's no question about that. But, as you mentioned, after the war, he was part of the reconciliation. And as the general in the Confederate Army, he conducted himself with dignity on the battlefield. He wasn't a war criminal. All right? Same thing with Stonewall Jackson. Now, a guy like Nathan Bedford Forrest, I'd take his statue down. Okay? I mean, there are varying degrees, and there are different circumstances surrounding people. But Americans don't know. And so that's why we write these books, and that's why it's so important that people read them and stand up for your history, for the country's legacy, for our traditions, because the far left wants to tear it all apart. Look at this idiot de Blasio, the mayor of New York City. This is a full-blown socialist, all right? He wants to tear down Columbus. He wants to tear down Grant's tomb. This is a loon. This is a guy who honeymooned in Cuba, violating the embargo. Yet he has power, and he's trying to rewrite the whole nation's history from his perch as mayor of New York City. These people have to be confronted.
We're talking to Bill O'Reilly, his new book, Killing England, The Brutal Struggle for American Independence. It's on our Facebook page, lauraingraham.com as well. Bill, the Mitch Landrieu from, of course, the mayor of New Orleans, politically connected, of course, family, who just 4 or 5 years ago was talking about the need to preserve history, but now is playing to what he believes is the identity politics of the moment and thinks he can secure future political favors and support. Let's listen.
The city of New Orleans has always prided itself on being a diverse place, a place where all people are welcome, a place where all kinds of people can come and enjoy themselves. Those monuments have been up there as a testament to, in my opinion, what was a false narrative of history. You have a city that's 67% African American. Individuals have to walk by those statues, which are in public places of reverence, and it was just really not who I thought the city of New Orleans was or who we ever were.
I have a feeling, Bill, that until recently, people just walked by the statues and didn't probably think much of them, and then suddenly the mainstream media and Hollywood and popular culture icons started to get involved, and people started finding offense.
Well, you have. I can't speak to Landrieu. You're probably right. He knows that the electoral base in New Orleans is minority, and so he plays to that. But let's take Los Angeles, for example. This is a great thing. They knocked out Columbus Day on the city calendar this year. No more Columbus Day in Los Angeles, the nation's second largest city.
Indigenous
and you know
Peoples
what they replaced
Day.
it with, Laura?
Right? Yeah.
Okay. Indigenous Peoples Day. Now, if you know the history of the indigenous people and how they fought each other, not take the white man, the Europeans out of it, just the indigenous peoples fighting each other. What happened to many of the tribes who lost the fight? Do you know?
Oh, no, brutal. Skinning people alive. Skinning people alive, too.
Well, okay, but aside from the torture, they were enslaved. Mm-hmm. The losing tribes became slaves to the winning tribes. Not in all cases. There were benign indigenous people tribes that did not do that, but it was brutal in many areas. There was slavery. Now, do you think that the Los Angeles City Council has any blanket clue about that? They don't. They don't know. This is all politically correct nonsense, crazy stuff, madness, and we the people have got to rise up against it.
We're talking to Bill O'Reilly here on the Laura Ingraham Show. So, Bill, what's next? You're doing. I know you have your podcast, which is really, really popular, and I get to go on that every now and then. And then you have your website, which is obviously very popular. But a lot of people, wondering, and people come up to me a lot and say, "When is Bill O'Reilly going to be back on TV?"
I don't know. I mean, it's a changing television world, that's for sure. Americans under the age of 40 don't watch television anymore, including TV news. They're all on their machines. They're all on the devices, and this is where they're getting their information. BillO'Reilly.com has been much more successful than I thought it would be. There are hundreds of thousands of people going in there. And I do a daily podcast, which is an extended talking points memo each night. And I like the freedom. I run the show. And it's financially very lucrative, so that's what we have. Now, will I come back on conventional television? The deal has to be right. The time has to be right. So I'm being patient for once in my life, because it's so hateful, Laura.
Oh, it's awful.
I have to warn you. For 20 years of my life, when I was on the Fox News Channel, I was attacked personally every single day. You will be too. Media Matters, Color of Change, Bonner Group, all the people who went in, and they're well-financed, they have millions of dollars to spend to destroy me and try to destroy Sean Hannity, who was smart enough to fight back. They're going to come after you. And so I have to make a decision. Do I want to come back into this hateful, and that's the word, hateful arena where their truth doesn't matter? It's destroy people with whom we disagree. We don't want their voices on the air. We don't want O'Reilly to be heard. So if I come back, I know I'm going to have to fight that every day. And that is a big part of the decision that I'm going to have to make.
Well, you can do that. I mean, they attacked you every day.
I can do it.
Yeah, you can do it. Do you want to do it? I guess is the choice.
But it's debilitating. Do I need to do it? It's debilitating. I've been in this business 42 years, as I told Lauer yesterday. Okay, I never had one complaint, not one, in 42 years with Human Resources HR in any of the dozen companies I work for. Okay, but the power now of the internet and the power of these far left groups, with all the money they have, they can smear you in a heartbeat. And no one cares about the truth. No one looks for the truth. It's all about money in the corporate arena, and in the media arena, it's all about ideology. It's a changing world. America is a changing place. And to me, it's frightening.
Bill O'Reilly, Killing England is out now. Another mega bestseller. Biggest franchise, historical books ever globally. 17 million copies in print. At a time where history is under attack, support these authors and support real historians. And I just really appreciate your joining us, Bill. I'd love to go on your podcast anytime. And I really appreciate everything you did for me. And I really just can't say that enough.
Program on the Fox News Channel.
All right. You take care. Bill.